the banter, the second chance to love. I just knew Kennedy Ryan was going to get me out of that reading slump, and she did. So I was definitely like listening at like a 2x speed. You better call me. Jessica is Sky. Barbara is Shirley. Hey Muse, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, my name is Sky Britnei. I'm a holistic and spiritual wellness practitioner, multidisciplinary artist, and Caribbean historian who uses books, wellness, and art to center the Caribbean diaspora. But more importantly, on this platform, I am just a woman in her early 30s on a journey of self-recovery, of remembrance, of coming home to herself, and really of just sharing my journey in all of its facets in hopes that it helps both you and I feel less alone and maybe even inspire you to share your own journey. And one of the ways that I have practiced self-recovery and coming home to myself has been through books. For some context, in July 2024, I rediscovered my love of reading, and things just kind of naturally progressed after that. In September of 24, I ended up creating a book club that exclusively centered Caribbean stories and Caribbean authors. And then a couple of weeks ago, I finally did a thing and made a bookstagram. So I've really been enjoying this journey of using books as a way to discover new worlds, learn more about myself, learn more about my culture as an Afro-Caribbean woman, and so much more. In today's video, I wanted to share with you some of my favorite reads from this year. And if that's something that interests you, I definitely invite you to stick around and maybe you'll add these books to your 2026 TBR. So I think I'm going to do this by month, starting with January, of course. And my favorite read in January 2025 was Patsy by Nicole Dennis Benn. I absolutely love this book. I did a physical read as well as audiobook. So most of my reads for the year were immersive reading. I really enjoyed like being able to physically read the book as well as really like be able to dive deep into the story through the audio experience as well. And what I loved about this book is that it was also a Caribbean read. And I find that with a lot of Caribbean audiobooks, the narrator, if I'm going to be honest, it's atrocious. It's bad. It's bad. But Patsy did not disappoint. I'm such a big advocate of hiring Caribbean artists to play Caribbean roles. And it was just such a pleasure listening to an authentic Jamaican accent in the audiobook for Patsy. Patsy follows a woman named Patsy on her journey migrating from Jamaica to the States. And it literally just takes us through the ebbs and flow of what that journey looks like. She is dealing with a daughter back home, a mother back home, her sexual identity, just the ebbs and flows of what it means to be an immigrant living in the United States. I don't remember the time frame. I think it might have been like early 2000s is when the book was set. I even think maybe after 9/11. So just also like navigating what that looked like. There were a few things that I really enjoyed about this book. One, I always love reading about migration stories. It will never not be interesting to me, especially as I can relate through, just secondhand experience of hearing my family talk about their own migration experiences. Two, I really enjoyed that more than a migration story. I really thought this was a story of autonomy, of sovereignty, of getting to choose and make choices for yourself by yourself. And I really enjoyed kind of watching Patsy take her autonomy. I don't even know if that's grammatically correct. Can you take your autonomy? I don't know. I just enjoyed the fact that she kind of came from a world where all of these choices were made for her. There was a lot of things that she did out of obligation. And whether we agreed with her or not, her journey to the States was one that was rooted in her choices. It was messy. She wasn't always a likable character, but it was real and it was honest. And I really enjoyed that. And again, the audiobook made the experience 10 times better. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. For February, my favorite book was the louise Ortega Survival Guide by Sonora Reyes, and they did an immaculate job with this book. This was a YA book, and I feel like YAs can kind of be hit or miss. This was definitely a hit for me. I really enjoyed the neurodivergent representation in this book. I enjoyed how they tackled the experience of sexual assault while also navigating neurodivergency, while also navigating familial difficulties that are going on. It was just such a beautifully told story, and one that tackled a very, you know, traumatic experience in a way that didn't feel extremely heavy. I definitely would recommend reading this book, and I cannot wait to check out the rest of Sonora Reyes's catalog. For March, my favorite book was another Caribbean read, and that is The Island of Forgetting by Jasmine Seeley. I absolutely adored learning more about Bajan culture through this book. I feel I'm going to embarrass myself because I'm not Bajan, but the amount of times that I said Koblen, I think I'm saying Koblen, after reading this book, I was just walking around like cheese and bread, Koblen. I loved this book. This book was an intergenerational story. Over the years, we follow 4 generations of a family, and we really get to see and navigate, or we get to see them navigate what generational curses look like in each generation. So you have a family member that is navigating living with a dream deferred. You have a family member that is navigating sexual assault. You have a family that's navigating sexual identity. And you see how all of these things play out in their lives and how it trickles down to each generation. And this was such a beautiful story. If I'm not mistaken, I gave this 4.5 stars. All of these books are 4 stars and above. I absolutely adored this book, and a huge shout out to the audiobook narrator as well. Loved hearing the Bayesian Creole, loved just it just was an authentic listening experience, and that again elevated the entire reading experience. For April, my favorite read was Fast by 𝑚𝒉𝒆 𝒂𝒍𝒅, and I really enjoyed this book. It was a heartbreaking one though. Like there were moments where I had to take a step back and pause because I wasn't ready. I just wasn't ready. I really enjoyed the aspect of romance that was in the book because I do think that helped to like lighten the load of what the main character had to go through. This was a book that I had seen so many people talking about, especially as I got back into reading. And I just kind of kept making a mental note to like, I'll read this, I'll read this, I'll read this. And when I finally got around to it, I'm so happy that I did. Such a beautiful, heartbreaking, heart-opening book. Definitely recommend reading. I recommend all these books, to be fair. In May, my favorite book was How to Say Babylon by Sophia Sinclair. This was also another Caribbean read, and this book was a memoir. I am somebody whose family is very diverse, and in that diversity, I did grow up with a lot of my family being Rastafarian, and this memoir details Sophia's experience growing up in a Rastafarian family. And it was such an interesting experience to read because there were some things that I resonated with, that I understood, and there were also some things that I disagreed with. There were some things to me that I want to say almost didn't feel fair to kind of blame on Rastafarianism. With that being said, I thoroughly enjoyed hearing her take on what it was like to grow up in that environment with a father that was so heavily a part of that way of life and how it affected her as a byproduct, and her siblings and the relationship with her siblings, the relationship with her parents, and so on. It was a very, very deep read that I felt a personal connection to. I also listened to this via audiobook, and again, this was one that listening to Sophia tell the story herself also elevated the experience. I will say there was a lot of poetic prose and lyrical language. Sometimes it was a little bit too much for me. So I was definitely like listening at like a 2x speed. But but it was still a really, really good book and one of my top reads of the year. For June, I started so many books and I finished none. I was in such a reading slump after May. I just couldn't get into any book fully. I couldn't fully commit to any one book. So no book got finished. Next. In July, my favorite book was Can't Get Enough by Kennedy Ryan. And I remember writing on Fable, like, I know who's gonna get me out of this reading slump. Kennedy. And she did. She did. I just knew Kennedy Ryan was going to get me out of that reading slump, and she did, and I'm so grateful for it because Hendrik's story was actually my favorite of the Skyland series. And I really, really enjoy Kennedy Ryan because she writes romance in such a nuanced, real, authentic way, in a way where you feel like you can literally see yourself in the story. Like it feels real. It feels like you would be sitting down with your homegirls and they like, girl, let me tell you about Maverick. Like, okay, friend, you better tell me about Maverick then. Like, I absolutely adored Can't Get Enough. I have told myself that one of my goals for 2026 is to read the rest of Kennedy Ryan's catalog because that's my girl. That's my For August, my favorite book was How to Love a Jamaican by Alexia Authors, and as you can guess, that was a Caribbean read. And this is an anthology that essentially tells the stories of Jamaicans living back home on the land and living abroad. And we get 12 different stories depicting this diverse diverse experience of Jamaicans. And it's just one of those books that in every story, I felt a bit of resonance. Like from the way that they were talking about their experience with their parents or their experience with other Jamaicans, kind of navigating their own cultural identity. All of the stories in the book, for the most part, held some type of personal resonance for me. And I just really enjoyed that anthology. And I'm not really a fan of anthologies. So the fact that I enjoyed this one lets you know it was good. In September, I had two favorite books I just could not pick at all. And they were A Girl Within a Girl Within a Girl by Nanda Reddy. I feel like I have talked about this book way too much. Like if you have checked out my other book videos, if you follow me on TikTok, if you follow me on my Bookstagram, I love this book. This book, in short, and if you haven't watched my other videos, which go check them out. This book follows a woman who receives a letter from her long lost sister. What this letter does is kind of invites us into the story of the main character as she is recounting her life. She starts off as a 12-year-old girl who is promised this life of luxury and beauty, migrating from Guyana to the United States. Not only is she promised this life of luxury, though, she's also tasked with paying off a family debt and bringing her entire family to the States. And you could just imagine the turmoil and all of the things that this young woman has had to go through her entire life for a debut. Shook. Absolutely recommends. And also, this was a Caribbean read. Author was from Guyana. My second favorite book of the month was 𝑻𝒉𝒆 by Jessica George. I also talked about this in my previous book video. And like I said in that video, I just think this book was written for the eldest daughters, the only daughters, the youngest daughter who has to play the role of the oldest daughter, any child that has had to essentially carry their family's strife on their back and are in a space and time where they are finally ready to reclaim their autonomy, when they're finally ready to choose themselves. Cried like 5 times reading it. So resonant, so beautifully written. And I think Jessica George is coming out with a book in 2026. Reading it. Oh, Jessica Jessica? Jessica? Hello? Jessica? Okay. Jessica is Sky. Barbara is Shirley, even though it's a different type of call, but y'all know what I mean. Moving on to October. In October, my favorite book was The Reformatory by Tananarive Again, another book that was in my last book video. What really stuck out to me, as I stated in that video, was that this book was rooted in fact. And that to me makes this book stand out. The fact that Tananarive was able to essentially give voice to so many young boys who have gone voiceless, whose stories have gone untold. And like I said in that video, the real horror, the real psychological thriller is that this book is rooted in fact. Now, my favorite book for November, Sweet Heat by Bolu Babalola. That book, I am actually hard pressed to say that Sweet Heat might actually be my favorite read of the year. Bolu, you see, after I get off the phone with Jessica, you better call me. Sweet Heat, the audio book, the book, the banter, the second chance to love, everything. Give me 20 more. That's it. Second chance love. They have the banter. They have like that British banter. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Okay. I can literally talk about that book all day in it. And Bolu, if by any chance you want to write a third book about them, time lapse, 10 years later, 2 kids in. Oh, actually, because then you're going to have to give them a conflict. Maybe not. Maybe not. Let's leave them happy. Okay. I love that book. Down. Okay, let's move on to December because I will literally stay here and rant about that book forever. So in December, I had 3 favorite books, and that would be Don't Cry for Me and Isaac's Song by Jacob Black, by Daniel Black, and How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps the House by Sherry Jones. So let's start with the first 2. The first 2 were both written by Daniel Black. Why can't I get that right? The first 2 were written by Daniel Black. Don't Cry for Me follows Jacob, who is essentially writing a series of letters to his son while he's on his deathbed. Jacob's on his deathbed, just to clarify. And we're not on his deathbed, but his life is slowly declining. That sounds crazy to say. Why? Words are escaping me. Things are slowly starting to decline for him. And he takes this as an opportunity to basically apologize to his son about the way that he treated him during his life, and also to give context to why he did some of the things that he did throughout his life. Also, for additional context, Isaac is a young gay Black man. And that truth severely impacted the relationship that Daniel and Isaac had. So we really get to learn more about Jacob's life, and again, why he did some of the things that he did. And although I didn't agree with a lot of what Jacob did, it was beautiful to hear a story about how he got to that point, and to hear and read him apologize to his son, because we don't often get that from our parents. And in the same breath, I really, really enjoyed Isaac's Song by Daniel Black. In Isaac's Song, we hear essentially that same relationship told from Isaac's point of view. So we meet Isaac after Jacob has died, and Isaac is overcome with emotion, and he is kind of perplexed as to why. This results in him seeking counsel from his therapist, who invites him to write his life story as a way to heal through some of that trauma, to learn more about himself, his father, and their relationship. And in that process, he does just that. He learns so much about the both of them through this retelling of his life story. And that book, I cried. I absolutely would recommend both of those books. And reading these two books actually made me request Daniel Black's entire catalog from the library. So in addition to, I got a call and I don't remember where I was, so let's move on. The last book on this list is going to be How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. And this was another Caribbean read, and this is by Sherry Jones. I loved this book. I also listened to this audiobook. Also, amazing narrator. Like I said, get Caribbean people to play Caribbean roles. I'm just loving all of the Caribbean representation, all of the Caribbean narrators. Just listening to you guys have been a pleasure. So this book actually reminded me of Crash, but like the Caribbean version. Y'all remember Crash with Ludacris and Sandra Bullock? It is essentially all of these different stories that interconnect and come together. Just see how all of their lives just interconnect and weave together. And this was just a brilliant book. All right, and that is my list of all of my favorite books of 2025. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, I again invite you guys to stay here a while. Subscribe, like the video, share it with a loved one, comment your favorite books of 2025 in the comments. I am so excited to just continue reading, continue building out this beautiful journey that I'm on. I have always loved books, and it's so cool to now be sharing that love of reading in community. Like, I love that. I feel so just overcome with joy sharing my journey in community with like-minded people. And so if you are here, thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for connecting with me. And I'm so tired of talking. I appreciate you. And I shall see you in the next video. Until then, read Black, read Indigenous, and read Caribbean. Bye, Muse.